So, Hayoim Yoim, today is the 5th of Cheshbon. Hayoim Yoim, Frierdiker Rebbe tells us the following. The Jewish people are compared to the stars twinkling in the high heavens. By their light, even he who walks in the darkness of night shall not blunder. Navigation by the stars. Navigation of humanity by the light of the Jewish people. Every Jew, man or woman, possesses enough moral and spiritual strength to influence friends and acquaintances and bring them into the light. I love them. Those are our marching orders for today. For ourselves, bring ourselves into the light and bring others with us. Lessons in Tanya. As Elisha Marshall pointed out yesterday, we had a long piece and we did not finish. Oh, stumbling. My whole self turned over. That would be something good. All right. We did not finish. So in Lessons in Tanya, we're on page 119. And God willing, we will finish yesterday and today. 119. You see just below the three dots. And on Akuti Amorim, we are on page 284, the big words, Vehine. Okay, yesterday, reading Parsha of the Zohar says that in the future, that the tree of life will prevail, and not the tree of good and evil, Tov v'Ra, and therefore Talmid Chachamim will no longer need to learn the laws of Isur v'Heter, because there will be an illumination, but the Amei Ha'aretz, the people who are not on that level, will. And the Alter Rebbe begins today by telling us that's absurd. That can't be the way to understand what I just said. Because, and he's going to tell us why. It's understood at first glance, at first glance, this is top of the mind. Miloshin Zeh HaMaimer, this the expression of the Zohar, L'chasire Merah, to take themselves away from evil. That Shalimit Isser V'Heter V'Seder Taharis Hu Me'elana de Tov v'Ra, that he says this good, and that the knowledge of what needs to be pushed away and what's permissible and what's not is from the tree of good and evil. And he said that in the time of the redemption, there will be no need for the tree of good and evil because everything will be exposed. Even though that's a wonder on its face, as we would say in English, right? And it contradicts and it contradicts the simple meanings that have been given us from our rabbis. Because the entirety of the Torah, which is revealed to us, and to our children, Nikra Eitz HaChaim. It's all called the Eitz HaChaim. The Zohar that we read distinguishes between Eitz HaChaim and the Eitz of the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. Whereas throughout the Torah, the oral Torah, the entire Torah is called the tree of life. It says Eitz Chaim hi l'machazichem bo. It's a tree of life, the entire Torah, to those who hold on to it. And not just the Sefer of the Zohar, that if one studies the Zohar, one is somehow moved to a level where it's no longer relevant, good and evil. But B'frat, the Hayagan is be a man, and particularly it's difficult to say that because in the time of the Chachamim, in the time of the Rashbi, the altar of the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, right, who, by the way, is also a great Tana himself in the Mishnah, paskening and giving his opinions on what's good and evil. The whole Holy Zohar had not even been revealed. And the entirety of the body of what we call Kabbalah was hidden in those days. And concealed from all the wise people of the generation, the Talmidei Chachamim. It was only revealed to very few people. And moreover, the Hatzon Leches, V'lei B'Rabin. And even those few people, it was not broadcast, right? It was not, hey, guys, there's a new Torah here, and we're going to live according to that, and we don't need to study the halachas of what's good and evil anymore. Kedisa B'Gemara is brought in the Gemara. As the Rizal writes later in the 1600s, the Dafke B'Daidas Elu, the Rizal writes in the 1600s, quite a few number of years later than Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. It says that specifically in these days, and it's his time, in these in the later generations, muta, that is permissible, mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah, legalizes hachokma, to reveal this chokmah. This is something that the Rebbe particularly stood upon a lot, in previous generations of Frierdiker Rebbe against the Misnagdim, because it says that if you study Kabbalah, which the Vilna Gaon study Kabbalah, etc., and all of those others who became called Misnagdim, the Kabbalah itself, in other words, Rav Shimon Yitzhak Luria said it's a mitzvah to study the Kabbalah. It's a mitzvah, liglas es chokmah. That's a side of remark. But it wasn't a mitzvah. It wasn't in those earlier generations. As we said earlier, the Zohar hadn't even been revealed, and even those who revealed it was a very small group and quiet. The Gam Rashbi, and here's another proof that you can't take this that we said earlier, that in the future we won't learn Isser v'Heter, what's permitted and what's not permitted. Because Rashbi himself, who was the author of the Zohar, he says in the Zohar Kodesh, that only a small group had permission in those days to have this knowledge revealed to them. Moreover, it's a wondrous thing that we're going to focus on the primacy of the Zohar. And not that there's going to be any learning of what's permissible and what's forbidden, what's permissible. The culture came because think about all the situations. It brings now a few of them. Financial transactions. To study the laws of financial transactions pushes away davening. Which davening was, which tefillah was ordered according to the secrets of the Zohar, and the study of financial transactions just to know what's to do and what's right and wrong pushes that away. But the Zohar was a book about Seidus HaZohar, the secrets by Yehudim Elyonim, and how to make unities up above. L'yodim, to those who know, and there was a small group, Rashbi and the Chaverim, like Rashbi, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his friends. And you can't say that this is going to be the study, the Zohar, rather than all of that. The Isa B'Gemara says in the Moon that Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Bar Yochai ben Yochai, he says here, Rav Shimon ben Yochai, the Chaverim, the whole and all those whose Torah was their life, that's what they did. They didn't interrupt. In other words, they kept learning the laws of Isser v'Heter, what's permissible, what's not permissible, or what's chayav and zaki, when a person would be chayav misa or not. They learned those, and they didn't even interrupt to daven. And also when they were engaged in laws of money, Rav Yehuda, like Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda, he's the last word in the Gemara on financial transactions. And they didn't even interrupt their study of what's permissible and not permissible to even daven, between once in 30 days. The Isa B'Gemara is brought. While he only interrupted while the Mahad Talmud, while he was reviewing his studies. The Yisuf Gemara is brought in the Gemara, Uber Rishalmi, and in the Babylonian Talmud and in Jerusalem Talmud. Perek Kamad Brochas, in the first Perek of Brochas. Savla Rashbi, the Rashbi, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is of the opinion that Krishma that even for Krishma, a person doesn't interrupt the study of Yisur V'Heter and all the laws in the Gemara. Not even a moment. Ke'im b'mikra, except for studying Bible, mikra, scripture. V'leim Mishnah, and not for the Mishnah, that difim mikra, which Mishnah has a superiority, and this is interesting, a little factoid in itself. The Mishnah has a superiority over scripture, and he's going to say why. According to the Rashbi, what's the superiority of Mishnah over Mikra? That you don't understand, you can't understand the scripture and its declarations of halacha without understanding and having the oral Torah, which explains how to do it. So you can't implement the written Torah without the oral Torah. So there's an advantage of the oral Torah over the written Torah. The Hilek Ben said this, and they didn't make any difference. In other words, all the sections of the oral Torah and halachas were studied. Well, the Hilek Ben said, they didn't distinguish between agricultural laws or the laws of the festival, of Kodshim and Taharis, and the laws of slaughtering and animals for the Mizbeach, and what's Pasha, or financial, Mazik and financial damages. And he writes parenthetically that the Rashbi, who wrote the Zohar and spoke about how the Zohar will surpass the learning of Nigla, he himself says in Raya Mehemna, that section of the Kama Mekaymis, in many places, the Mishnah in Shivcha, that Mishnah is the Shivcha, the handmaiden to the Mikra, and it's, well, Mikra, Shahu Torah Moshe, and the written Torah, which is the Torah of Moshe, Vade Adifa, the Kabbalah, he says that the Mishnah, the written Torah, which is the Torah that Moshe received, he says, Vade Adifa me Kabbalah. It's much deeper than Kabbalah, or we say it has more worth than Kabbalah. Diu Maturnisa, because it's the Maturnisa. The Mitra is the Maturnisa is the queen, the handmaiden versus the queen, and he calls the Mishnah and the Talmud the queen. Raya Mehemna, in the Shum over there in the Zohar itself. The Torah Shechsav Hu Malka, and the written Torah is called the king, right? But the oral Torah is called the queen, not just the handmaiden. Then he said, Abo Hamalubish Bezoh, and he explains in parentheses, within the parentheses, that this refers to the fundamental of the father, Hamalubish Bezoh, the fundamental of the father, the king, as the king gives flow and energy into the midos. Which because of Arizal, that's how the Arizal explains this. All right, but the point is that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai himself acknowledges that the halacha is supreme, because without the whole and his behavior indicates that as well, because of the amount of time he spent studying, and we'll go on with this in even further. The Gam Pibul Hadushas, the Tirutzim, and also the argumentation, the back and forth to discover and clarify, Mevara Hilchos, as it's called in Aramaic, to explain and clarify the halacha, back and forth, and to Mavara, to take it out of the world of confusion, which is called the Sitra Achra, the other side, the world where things are not clear, and take it out from the Sitra Avra, Viruach Hatuma, and the spirit of uncleanliness. We find the rest by the Rashbi himself, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. The Osik by Tuva, he did a lot of study of Nigla, of Torah. Even when he and his son Eliezer were running from the Romans and were in the cave, they spent a lot of time on Nigla. The Adarab, on the contrary, it was the Schus Sar Hamayra, that it was through the affliction of the cave, meaning that they were stuck there. Here's a good example of turning darkness into light. We're stuck in a cave. We're being pursued by the Romans who want to kill us. That brought forth a concentration in the cave, to this. Kediyasa b'Gemara, as is written in the Gemara, the Omalach Pinchas ben Yair. Pinchas ben Yair said to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, Akal Kushya Kutala Pirukit. That on every that Rav Shimon said to him, to the other one, many different explanations on one question in the Torah, in the oral Torah, in the halachic part of the Torah. And Rab Shimon said to him, to Rab Pinchas, I wouldn't have come on to this had I not had the opportunity to study so deeply into Nigla, the revealed part of the Torah, in the time that I was in the cave. The Gam be'emes, and also in truth, al kochor ikr askeihim b'mayr, you have to say that their occupation in the cave, which was in Torah and the Shnayos, the oral Torah, Tov Resh Sidre, which were then, there were 600 orders before they were divided into the Masechtas that we had. There were 600 orders of the Mishnah, Shehoya B'Yamehem, which was in those days. Ad Rabbeinu HaKadosh, until Rabbeinu HaKadosh came along and started, ordered the Talmud the way we have it today. And the Ilu Sefer HaZohar, so there was a lot of stuff, right? The Ilu Sefer HaZohar, but if you want to say that their main focus, well, we have everything here contradicts what we're about to say, but if you want to continue and try to say that their study was in the Zohar, in Tikkuni Zohar, that's a very small book, and they could have finished it in 2 or 3 months. Because they were smart enough, they didn't have to review it more than once, and so that couldn't have been their occupation in all the years that they were in the cave. Excuse me, someone's off mute. Please put yourself back on mute. Thank you. The Gam Amr Rabbis, hope we're getting the train of thought here. I know I'm going fast, like a train. Do interrupt me if you're not finding something that you understand. But the train of thought is, you can't say that the Zohar, this is what we said before, that the Zohar is going to be the only thing we studied, or that it is that was, once the Zohar was there, things changed. No, we see things didn't change at all. And even Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar, was occupied in the laws of what's permissible and not permissible, etc. Gamnu Ramesenu Arzal, and our rabbis have said, Miyem Shechor Beis Hamikdash, and here's a wrap up on this little piece, that they have said, the sages have declared, Miyem Shechor Beis Hamikdash, from the time that the temple is destroyed, Ein Leila HaKodesh Baruch Hu, there's no way to, there's no way to him, to come close to him. There's no pathway except Ella Dalet Amos of Halacha Belvad. The 4 Amos refers to Rishus HaYachid. If you want to find the Yachida Shel Oilam, this is one of the Darshim of Rishus HaYachid. If you want to find the Yachid Shel Oilam, the one who is the singularity of the world, where will you find him? Again, in the doing. Ma'asehu ha'ikar. And how will you know how to do? And how do we know how to do? Only by studying halacha. And in addition, now he's going to say something that's even more wondrous and out of the box or incredible than anything I've said so far, which will demonstrate the importance of halacha. How is it going to be possible? We came from this place earlier, that in Mashiach, in the time of Messiah, the main study is going to be Kabbalah and Chassidus, right? And not Nigla, right? He says, here's some interesting question. How is it possible that it's in the days of Mashiach, that you're not going to have to know the laws of what's permissible, what's forbidden, what's permissible, Batuma B'Tahar, or what's impure or pure? You're going to have to know Yishchatu HaKabonis. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the temple will be rebuilt. Right? And according to the opinion that we follow, and most of people today, there will be korbanos. There is an opinion that there won't be korbanos. The korbanos will just be ruchnius. But we hold the opinion that they will be physical, and therefore there'll be the need to slaughter them. V'gam chulin. There'll be things which are chulin, which are not, which are weekday, and there's kaddish and choil. How will you know how to slaughter this? How will you know the laws of how to, and he's going to want to talk about the laws of the knife, how the knife has to be in order to slaughter. And you're going to have to know what makes a shchita, a slaughtering puzzle, that is no good. And you're going to have to know to be able to look at a knife and know, is there a blemish in the knife which disqualifies it? All of which, of course, is taught in the oral Torah, in the halacha. He says, will a man be born in that, and it will be part of his built-in nature that he's going to slaughter, without these fine-tuned halachas about the knife and the strokes of the knife and how that should go? Will a knife stand? Will a knife stand in a way of perfection? Will a knife always remain perfect and stand without any pagima, without any blemish ever? And there are many other halachas, holav and dam, right, fat and blood, the shatter suited and other things which are isser. The gam tumas hames, you're going to have to know about the burial and tumas hames. You have to know that. Kedikasiv is written, Hanar ben mea shona yomos, a person will die at 100 years, meaning that life will be prolonged. I mean, we're almost at that stage and beyond now. V'gam tumas yeledes, but you're going to have to know the laws of burial. You're also going to have to know tumas yeledes, the tumah that occurs when a woman gives birth. Torah leda, you have to know it. Because see if it's written, Torah yeledes yachdon. The person will, in the time of the future, there is a miracle type of thing which is mentioned, that she'll be pregnant and give birth, instantaneously. And also another miracle, that from one impregnation a woman will give forth many, many children. But you're still going to have to know all the laws are pertaining to childbirth and tuma and tahar. When does the woman become tameh? When does she tahar? How does she get purified? As he says, din isar tuma le'yishtana. The laws of prohibitedness, of what is prohibited and what's permitted, and what's tameh, what's impure and pure, will not change. Now the Alter Rebbe sort of concludes this section here and says, I don't need any more examples. We don't need to go on at more length than something which is straightforward, from a foursome and publicized. And we don't have to, and if it's hafku b'hashas, and it's turned over and over again in the oral Torah, the midrashim and the midrashim, the parach hilkos and the mashiach, and the oral Torah asks itself, what will be the halacha when Mashiach comes? Clearly, halacha will be important. And it says, "Livshat kol hasfekus," and Eliyahu will come, and he will resolve all kinds of doubts. Parsha osid Eliyahu lehadrasha, and it's talking about the future. There will still be questions in halacha. Oh, Eliyahu will be there. Thank you very much, but we're going to need to answer those questions. Another thing which is not understood, because we said earlier that the Talmidei Chachamim will not need to come on to the Amei Ha'oretz for their food, that they will have food of their own. So we said, moving because of the Le'yafanis and Talmidei Chachamim Amei Ha'oretz. It says that in the future the Talmidei Chachamim will not have to come on to the Amei Ha'oretz, V'leime Erev Rav, or the mixed multitude, the Ochlim Pasol Tameh, and we said about them, they eat things which are prohibited and which are impure, the Osrim, Has v'Sholem, because when it speaks about the future, it says, in the time of the temple, which was a time when the Shekhinah it was a time of Geula, it was a time when the Shekhinah was revealed down here on earth, right? The Talmidei Chachamim did not get their sustenance from the Amei Ha'oretz, the Ochlim Pasol Ba'asur, who ate things which are not permitted. They had sadois, they had fields and vineyards. Among the Amei Ha'oretz, the Talmidei Chachamim had their own fields and vineyards. And nevertheless, they were not sitting there lounging, learning kabala, and being fed from the Amei Ha'oretz. They had fields of their own, and they were also occupied in limud isur v'heter, in the teachings of what's forbidden and permissible. And Tumah v'Tahara, what's impure and pure. Kol Hazugais, all the pairs. The pairs refer to the Chaverim, the pairs in the Zohar. There are pairs, and in the Rava and Abaya, and they were disputants, but they were couples, etc. So all the pairs. So Hoyam Yamei Bayas Sheni, who existed in the time of the Second Temple, the Hamina Talmidim La'alafim V'Ravavos, and they stood up many Talmidim, thousands of Talmidim who were learned in halacha. And they only studied the Kabbalistic things in a concealed way. We're up to date. And that puts the squash on the idea that in the future, all we're going to have to do is know the Kabbalah, and we won't learn Yisur Beheta. And then he'll go further. Next time, if you look even further, then we'll take this up tomorrow. Okay. Any questions on this?
Congratulations, you did
it. I don't know. I wonder. Someone should tell me if you know. I don't know who ordered and when was ordered the division of the Tanya. If someone knows that, I'd like to hear that. Yeah, because sometimes we got a short day, and then we have days of impossible. All right, we'll figure that one out. Okay, guys, take care. Everybody, have a wonderful day till we meet again tomorrow in Hashem.